man who made baseball roar in the 1920s, was nearly written off as a lost cause before he turned 8 years old. His powerful left arm and quick bat setting him apart from the other boys. But this wasn't just about sports. He learned carpentry, shirt making, and the kind of discipline he'd carry into his career. Still, no one outside those walls could have guessed it, but the boy the court had given up on was about to throw his way into baseball history. His name is still shorthand for excellence. And soon, that swing would change baseball forever. What if I told you that the greatest legend in American sports, the man who made baseball roar in the 1920s, was nearly written off as a lost cause before he turned 8 years old? That before he became the home run king, he was a troubled kid wandering the docks of Baltimore, picking fights with police officers, and on track for a life headed anywhere but the record books. You know the name Babe Ruth. You've heard about the 714 home runs, the roaring Yankee crowds, the famous called shot. But that's only the surface. Behind the towering numbers and booming cheers was a man of contradictions, a disciplined athlete forged inside the strict walls of a reformatory. Yet a larger-than-life character whose appetite for excess was as legendary as his swing. This is the story of a boy declared incorrigible by a judge, who became a pitcher so dominant he set records that stood for decades, who then transformed into the most feared slugger in baseball history. It's the story of the trade that cursed a franchise for 86 years, the moment that may or may not have been the boldest prediction in sports history, and the dream he chased until his final days, a dream he never caught. Babe Ruth didn't just change baseball. He saved it, revived it, and redefined what a sports hero could be. But the real Babe Ruth, the man behind the myth, is far more fascinating than the headlines ever told. And to truly understand him, we have to start where no one expected greatness to grow: a Baltimore reformatory for boys. Babe Ruth's story didn't begin under stadium lights. It began in the shadow of Baltimore's docks, where coal smoke filled the air and trouble was never far away. Born George Herman Ruth Jr. on February 6, 1895, his parents ran a saloon just steps from the waterfront. They worked long hours, leaving young George to roam the streets on his own. By the time most kids were learning to read, Ruth was chewing tobacco, swearing like a sailor, and skipping school to watch the ships come in. It wasn't just mischief, it was chaos. He got into fights, stole from shopkeepers, and even taunted local police. At just 7 years old, his behavior pushed his parents to an unthinkable decision. They went to court and had their own son declared incorrigible. The judge sent him to St. Mary's Industrial School for Boys, a Catholic orphanage and reformatory. The walls were tall, the discipline strict, and corporal punishment was common. But it was also the place where Ruth's life would change forever. There he met brother Matthias Bootlier, a towering figure with a booming laugh and a love for baseball. Matthias taught Ruth how to hit, how to pitch, and most importantly, how to channel his wild energy into the game. Ruth would later say, "I think I was born as a hitter the first day I ever saw him hit a baseball." At St. Mary's, Ruth played up to 200 games a year, his powerful left arm and quick bat setting him apart from the other boys. But this wasn't just about sports. He learned carpentry, shirt making, and the kind of discipline he'd carry into his career. Still, no one outside those walls could have guessed it, but the boy the court had given up on was about to throw his way into baseball history. By the time Ruth left St. Mary's at 19, his arm was his ticket out. That ticket came in the form of Jack Dunn, owner of the minor league Baltimore Orioles. Dunn saw the raw power in Ruth's left arm and signed him immediately. There was just one problem. Ruth was still legally a minor, so Dunn became his legal guardian, leading teammates to joke about Dunn's new babe. The nickname stuck, and George Herman Ruth Jr. became simply Babe Ruth. On the mound, Ruth was electric. His fastball cut through batters like a blade. and his control was sharp enough to frustrate even the league's best hitters. His time with the Orioles was short-lived. The Red Sox snatched him up, and suddenly Ruth was in the majors, wearing Boston across his chest. Over the next 5 seasons, he was more than good. He was dominant. In 1916, he posted a league-best 1.75 ERA and 9 shutouts, a record for left-handers that would stand for more than 60 years. That same year, in the World Series, he pitched 14 scoreless innings in a single game, a feat that wouldn't be topped for nearly 4 decades. But Ruth had a fire in him that didn't always stay under control. In 1917, after a disputed call, he stormed off the mound, punched the umpire in the face, and earned himself a suspension and a fine. The man replacing him that day threw a combined no-hitter, but the only thing people could talk about was Ruth's temper. Still, the truth was clear. As a pitcher, he was one of the best in the game. But there was another truth, one Ruth couldn't ignore. He didn't just want to pitch every 4 days. He wanted to hit. And when he hit, the ball traveled farther than anyone had ever seen. And soon, that swing would change baseball forever. But first, it would break Boston's heart. By 1919, Babe Ruth was no longer just a pitcher. He was the Red Sox's biggest attraction. World War I had drained rosters across baseball, and Ruth's bat was too powerful to leave on the bench. He started playing the outfield and first base, hitting home runs at a pace the game had never seen. That season, he smashed 29 homers, a single-season record, and packed stadiums wherever Boston played. But off the field, tensions were boiling. Ruth knew his worth and demanded a salary more than double what he was making. Red Sox owner Harry Frazee had a problem. He was deep in debt, owing money from his purchase of the team and financing his other passion, Broadway theater. Frazee needed cash, and Ruth was his most valuable asset. On December 26, 1919, Frazee made the deal that would haunt Boston for nearly a century. He sold Babe Ruth's contract to the New York Yankees for $100,000, the largest sum ever paid for a baseball player, plus a $350,000 loan secured by a mortgage on Fenway Park. The public reason? Money troubles. The rumor? Frazee needed the cash to finance the musical No, No, Nanette. While the timeline doesn't quite match, the connection stuck in the public's mind, and the outrage was instant. Boston fans were crushed. New York fans celebrated like they'd won the lottery. And soon, the trade earned a chilling nickname, the Curse of the Bambino, an 86-year championship drought for Boston that became one of the most famous legends in sports. For Ruth, the move was life-changing. In New York, he was about to unleash the most dominant hitting streak the game had ever seen. The pitcher was gone. The slugger had arrived. When Babe Ruth walked into the Yankees clubhouse in 1920, he was stepping into a new life and taking baseball with him. After a slow start, Ruth erupted in May, hitting 11 home runs in a single month, then 13 more in June. By the end of the season, he had crushed 54 home runs, more than most entire teams. In 1921, he broke his own record with 59, and in 1927, he hit an astonishing 60 home runs, a record that would stand for 34 years. This wasn't just personal success. Ruth was dragging the entire sport into a new era. Before him, baseball was a low-scoring game built on bunts, steals, and singles. Ruth turned it into a spectacle. His towering home runs brought fans back in droves, especially in the wake of the 1919 Black Sox scandal that had nearly destroyed public trust in the game. The crowds were so massive. The Yankees built a new stadium in 1923, the largest in baseball, and it quickly earned a nickname that still echoes today, the house that Ruth built. But while his bat was rewriting the record books, his lifestyle was rewriting the boundaries of what an athlete could get away with. Off the field, Ruth lived fast, and the consequences were catching up. And in 1925, one strange incident would become one of the most talked about moments of his career, even though no one really knew what caused it. Babe Ruth didn't just play baseball, he performed it. On the field, he was a showman with a swing built for drama. Off the field, he was the life of every party, living as loudly as he played. In the roaring 1920s, he became the embodiment of excess. He was famous for marathon nights out, demolishing steaks and beer by the gallon. He called everyone Doc or Kid because he couldn't be bothered to remember names. In the summer heat, he was known to slip chilled cabbage leaves under his cap to stay cool. But in 1925, his hard-living ways caught up to him, in spectacular fashion. During spring training, Ruth collapsed on a train platform in North Carolina. The press dubbed it the bellyache heard round the world. Officially, it was blamed on bad hot dogs and soda. Unofficially, whispers pointed to overindulgence in alcohol, or even a more scandalous cause that sports writers of the time didn't dare print outright. That year, his season sputtered. His image, for the first time, took a hit. But Ruth's ability to rebound was as legendary as his bat. Within a year, he was back to blasting home runs, anchoring the Yankees' fearsome Murderers Row lineup, and drawing bigger crowds than ever. And then, in 1932, he stepped into the batter's box for one of the most famous and most debated moments in sports history. October 1st, 1932, Game 3 of the World Series, Wrigley Field. The Yankees and Cubs were locked in a heated battle, and Babe Ruth was the center of every insult the Chicago faithful could throw. The score was tied. Ruth stepped to the plate in the fifth inning. Cubs players heckled him from the dugout. Fans hurled jeers from the stands. 2 strikes came quickly. Then, Ruth did something that would spark arguments for generations. He made a gesture. Some say he pointed to center field. Others insist he was motioning toward the Cubs bench. The next pitch came in, and Ruth crushed it. A towering shot over center field that seemed to hang in the air forever before disappearing into the crowd. Nearly 500 feet. Was it the most confident prediction in baseball history? Or just a misread moment, inflated by legend? Cubs pitcher Charlie Root swore that if Ruth had truly called it, the next pitch would have put him on the ground. Ruth, as always, left it to the public to decide, smiling and saying, "It's in the papers, isn't it?" Truth or myth, it became one of the defining moments of his career, the perfect marriage of skill, swagger, and showmanship. But even legends can't stay on top forever, and for Ruth, the final chapters were approaching fast. By the mid-1930s, the years of relentless play and late nights had taken their toll. Babe Ruth was slower, heavier, and no longer the unstoppable force he once was. But there was one thing he still wanted, maybe even more than another championship. He wanted to manage a major league team. To Ruth, it seemed like the natural next step. He'd been the face of baseball for over a decade, knew the game inside and out, and still drew crowds everywhere he went. But owners and executives weren't convinced. His reputation for wild living and bending the rules made them doubt his discipline. Yankees general manager Ed Barrow put it bluntly, "How can he manage other men when he can't even manage himself?" Frustrated, Ruth turned down offers to manage in the minors. He believed he belonged at the top. Then, in 1935, the Boston Braves dangled what seemed like a dream, a vice presidency, a chance to be the team's public face, and the promise of a managerial role the next season. It was a lie. Ruth quickly realized he'd been used as a marketing stunt. His duties were little more than shaking hands and selling tickets. Still, on May 25, 1935, in Pittsburgh, he gave fans one last glimpse of his magic, hitting 3 home runs in a single game, the last being his 714th career homer, and the first fair ball ever to leave Forbes Field entirely. A week later, after a blow-up with owner Emil Fuchs, Babe Ruth walked away from the game as a player. The dream of managing in the majors had slipped away for good. After his retirement, Babe Ruth remained one of the most recognizable faces in America. But by 1946, his health began to fail. Doctors discovered a malignant tumor at the base of his skull, a rare and aggressive cancer. The treatments were experimental for the time, combining surgery, radiation, and newly developed drugs. For a brief moment it seemed to work, and Ruth was back in the public eye, smiling for cameras, attending games. On April 27, 1947, Major League Baseball declared it Babe Ruth Day, with celebrations at every ballpark. At Yankee Stadium, over 58,000 fans packed the stands to honor him. His voice was already weak, but his presence still commanded the field. The remission didn't last. By 1948, the disease had returned, and Ruth's body was frail. On June 13th, for Yankee Stadium's 25th anniversary, he appeared one final time. Wearing his old number 3, he used a bat as a cane, walking slowly toward home plate. The crowd roared, and photographer Nat Fain captured the moment in an image that would win the Pulitzer Prize. Babe Ruth bows out. 2 months later, on August 16, 1948, Babe Ruth passed away in his sleep at the age of 53. His body lay in Yankee Stadium for 2 days, as over 77,000 people came to pay their respects. At St. Patrick's Cathedral, thousands more filled the streets outside during his funeral mass. The man who had been larger than life, who had filled ballparks and newspaper pages for decades, was gone. But his legend was just beginning. Babe Ruth didn't just play baseball. He transformed it. When the Black Sox scandal of 1919 had shaken the sport's reputation, Ruth's towering home runs and electric personality pulled it back from the brink, turning baseball into America's pastime once again. His career numbers remain staggering. A lifetime slugging percentage of .690, the highest in history. An OPS of 1.164, still unmatched. And 714 home runs, a record that stood for nearly 40 years. But numbers only tell part of the story. Ruth was proof that greatness can come from the most unlikely beginnings, that a troubled kid from the docks of Baltimore could become a national hero. He inspired generations of players, drew millions of fans to the game, and set the standard for what it meant to be a sports superstar. Decades after his death, his impact still echoes. His memorabilia sells for record-breaking prices. His name is still shorthand for excellence. In 2018, he was posthumously awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom, honoring not just his athletic achievements, but his charity work and his role in shaping American culture. Babe Ruth was flawed, bold, and unforgettable. A man of appetites and ambition, talent and temper, discipline and defiance. He lived big, played bigger, and left a legacy that refuses to fade. In the end, he wasn't just the greatest slugger of all time. He was the embodiment of the American dream, proof that legends aren't born perfect, they're made, and that is why Babe Ruth is larger than life. History.